Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to Talkin' Movies. And some of you are probably wondering a few things. First, hey, where's your reviews of the movies from this weekend? Or what the hell is this? Why haven't I put up heavily edited and scripted reviews? That's just it. I'm not saying I'm not gonna do that stuff anymore. But part of me is just kind of tired of the monotony of everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love being a critic. I love going to see movies. I love talking about movies. But really, part of me is just getting tired of, everything feeling the same. I'll see a movie and then I'll write a script and then I'll perform that script. And sometimes I got to try to be funny, and sometimes I can be funny, and sometimes I just don't feel like it, and it feels forced to me sometimes. I got that feeling when I was doing my last Broken review of Pacific Rim. And though I enjoyed doing the Broken reviews, I mean, I had a great time doing it for, Pitch Perfect and stuff like that, but I felt okay, but I don't know, it just didn't feel right. And though I enjoyed doing it, I still thought the Pacific Rim one was okay. Um, I got to a point where it's like, I just want to talk. I just want to talk about the movies. And again, I'm not saying I'm not going to do reviews and things like that, edited and sometimes scripted. I don't know. I'm just trying to mix things up a little bit. So for now, I'm gonna be, whatever I see, I'm gonna just put some together and I'm gonna talk about them. I feel comfortable, more comfortable, sitting behind this mic and just giving my thoughts. And I've got a few notes, but I'd rather just talk off the cuff than heavily script things. It just feels more natural to me and more comfortable to me. And I've talked about it before, not being really comfortable in front of a camera. But yeah, for the most part, I really just want to mix things up a little bit. So we're going to be talking movies today, and I've got 3 today. I was going to start with A Quiet Place, but I figured I'd save the best for last. The first movie I'm going to talk about is Blockers. This movie is about three parents trying to stop their daughters from taking part in a sex pact on their senior prom night. I won't totally agree with the audiences on this one, but I can't totally agree with the critics either. The critics love this movie a little more than audiences did. I'm kind of stuck in the middle with this one. There's a lot to like about this movie, but then again, it's not totally original. It's got okay comedy, and the message is decent. Because, I did find myself laughing at times, and I am happy to say that some of the more cartoony scenes from the trailer aren't even in the movie. There's the scene in the trailer where John Cena has to catch Ike Barinholtz falling off a balcony, and he throws him up and throws him into the ceiling. I was glad to see that this movie dropped a lot of the slapstick bullcrap that were forced into other comedies. I can think of a few off the top of my head that it's just you're trying to tell this story, and then you add this slapstick into it, and it just kind of takes you out of the story. But this one, I think the story, though not too original, was strong enough that by taking out the slapstick, I mean, don't get me wrong, the butt chug thing is still in there, even though it's not exactly what it seems. Yes, John Cena does have a tube stuck up his butt, and they have to pour beer into it, and he's trying to chug it in through his butt. Well, the college kids that are up against him are faking it, which makes it even funnier. So yeah, it still has some stuff like that, but it doesn't go too overly cartoony most of the time. And there's, like I said, a couple scenes here and there, but nothing like you've seen in other comedies that are trying to tell, they're trying to tell a good story, but then they just get too cartoony. But I think this helped the movie a lot, because they did try to deal with a few serious things. I mean, this isn't, okay, the trailer makes it seem like, the girls are, have totally made up their minds and they're gonna do it, right? Well, the kids, all three of them, have their own little stories, and then so do the parents. John Cena's character is very overprotective, and his daughter, he's not ready for his daughter to grow up. It's one of those where the parent sees the kid as, they still see the kid as the little girl, even though he's got to get with the fact that she's growing up. And his daughter in the movie, though she has, she has a character arc, it's pretty simplistic. She's down for doing the business, so to speak, but then there's second thoughts there. Leslie Mann's character, her daughter, it starts off kind of silly because the daughter's like, I've known this guy for 6 months and I'm so in love, and you kind of, as a parent, you kind of go, oh boy, it's one of those. But you can also see there's a story there that the daughter wants to go off to college, and Leslie Mann's character, the mom, is too close to the daughter and of course is afraid of her leaving, and you kind of know where I'm going with that. Ike Barinholtz's character, his daughter, she's in the pact, but for the wrong reasons, and I don't want to really spoil that because I think that her story and Ike Barinholtz's story is probably the strongest story of the whole movie. And Ike Barinholtz's character is divorced from her mom, and she wants nothing to do with him, yet it turns out that he knows her better than anybody. He knows what's going on. He knows what the daughter's going through, and nobody else does. And so they have actually some really good moments in the movie. This is one of those movies that it's one of those, the parents and the kids have to meet in the middle kind of storyline. They all have lessons to learn. So, I mean, you've seen this kind of movie before, but I thought, like I said, the fact that they kind of dumped the slapstick BS for the most part and focused on the characters themselves, while not perfect, it does a really good job at telling these stories of the parent and the kid. And, also the movie is very predictable in that nature, because like I said, it's just that kind of movie. It found an entertaining way and a good way with decent acting and just fairly well-developed characters to tell that meeting in the middle storyline. Like I said, so very predictable. That being said, the quote-unquote sequel bait ending is really funny. You think it's going one way, and then something else happens, and it worked for me a lot. So, this movie's okay. Would I say rush out to the theater to see it? I'm not going to say rush out. If you go see it in a theater, see it at a cheaper time. If not, just wait for it to be a rental. The next movie I want to talk about is Chappaquiddick. This movie depicts Senator Ted Kennedy's involvement in the fatal 1969 car accident that claimed the life of a young campaign strategist that worked with his brother and his brother's campaigns. I'm a bit torn on this one as a movie. At times, I really liked where this movie was going. It had this serious tone to it, especially at the first. It felt like it was going to tell this serious story, but then, and I know this wasn't on purpose, this movie wasn't trying to be a comedy, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it was trying to be funny, but at other times, the acting and situations almost came off as comedy. There's an example I can give you is, okay, this incident has happened, and Ted Kennedy has opened his big mouth and done something he shouldn't have done when it comes to the story getting out, and his father has gathered the legal team, which is just this huge group of lawyers and strategists and stuff that get together, and anytime he like reveals something to them, the whole crowd would go, oh man, what did you do? It just felt that, I don't know why, just the acting in those scenes, just, it almost felt like, okay, it's not exactly like South Park, but whenever, they'll say something in South Park and the whole crowd will be like, robber, 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 robber. That's what it felt like to me, whenever those parts would happen. That being said, when the serious stuff is happening, it works really well. Really, as I'm not I would never consider myself a big historian. So I only knew the basics of this whole situation. I think an older audience that, either is really into history or an older audience that lived through it might get more out of this movie. I will say also, the movie does not play nice or pull too many punches with who Ted Kennedy was. It does try to play a bit of a sympathy card, putting the blame on Teddy's father for some of his ideas and motivations. It tries to give Ted Kennedy a conscience at times, whether or not he had one. I didn't know the guy, so, so when it comes to the character, at times he feels like the worst human being ever, but then they try to give him these little bits and pieces of maybe I should do the right thing, but and for the most part it works. Then again, you kind of, since it is based on a true story, you kind of know pretty much where they're going to go with it. I mentioned them a little before. The movie does show a good job at showing the men behind the man, so to speak. The room full of strategists and lawyers using every tactic that they can to cover up and or tell the story the way they want it to be told. It does a good job with that when it's not feeling funny, because they would show, okay, this is what we want to do, and then something would happen, and then they'd have to change things, and that part was kind of interesting, except for when I was getting a chuckle out of it. Like I said, when it comes to laughing, there's a scene where Teddy is going to go to the girl's funeral, and he puts on a neck brace, and just the acting with that scene where, his cousin is trying to tell him, take off the stupid neck brace, and he's like, no, I like it, and he was acting kind of silly, and then he goes, I'm going to show the guys, and he goes in there, and they're like, take that stupid thing off, and he's like, F you guys, I like it, and it was just weird. So like I said, there was times this movie, it would take itself out of its seriousness and be kind of weird and funny, but not on purpose. I know it wasn't trying to be funny. When it comes to the performances of the movie, though, they're pretty solid. Jason Clarke plays Ted Kennedy. I'm not going to say I always bought him in the part. There were times, though, especially like when he talked, if you've heard Ted Kennedy talk, there was times he got it and times he didn't. There was times you could hear that voice the way he was delivering it, and times you couldn't. And then when it came to the look of him, more of the times when he was just sitting there, sitting still, there were times you could really see it. Then again, there was times that, it's like, oh, that's Jason Clarke. I didn't lose myself into him playing the role all the time. But then again, there were times that I did. Ed Helms played the Kennedy cousin, Joseph Gargan. He was kind of the the living, breathing embodiment of Ted Kennedy's conscience. He was always trying to tell Teddy, do the right thing. And there's times you think Teddy's going to listen to him. There's times, of course, he doesn't. So I thought he did a pretty good job in that role. It's always interesting to see Ed Helms playing non-comedic roles. I'm okay with that because I think he does a decent job. I'm looking forward to seeing Ed Helms take a role that's like dark. Like whenever, you'd see like Robin Williams take a really dark role or something like that. I'm really curious to see him try something like that. There's other good performances from Jim Gaffigan, Olivia Thirlby, Clancy Brown, who I love. Really, though he's not in the movie a ton, the standout performance of this movie by far goes to Bruce Dern, who played Joseph Kennedy Sr. With barely a word and barely a few actions, he showed so much range when it came to things like being despicable, soulless, brutal. I mean, just the look on his face, was just so menacing. Even though the dude could barely move, he was in a wheelchair, and he could barely talk. I remember only him saying a few words in the movie, the words alibi and a couple others. And it's just so crazy how good Bruce Dern really is, with minimal movement, just the expressions on his face and the look in his eyes. I read an interview with Bruce Dern, and it was interesting the take he took on this character, because he's even said in interviews how much he despised Joseph Kennedy Sr. He was talking about just what a scumbag he was in real life. I don't know, being that when this movie was released a little earlier in the year, I don't know if there's going to be any awards talk, any Oscar talk when it comes to Bruce Dern and, in a Best Supporting role. But if he gets nominated for this, I will not be surprised. This movie does show that having fame or a famous name or a well-known name can keep some people out of trouble. It's just, the Kennedys, they may have been somewhat of a dying legacy back then because, just assassinations and, things like that. But still, that name carried a lot of weight because, if this incident happened to anybody, just if Teddy was just, Ted Jones, and this happened, he would definitely probably still be in prison or have died in prison. But of course, being who he was, whatever happened that night, he would have at least saw some jail time, if not a lot of jail time. But, fame was the game, and, fame kept him out of it. So this movie is not going to be for everybody. It's very slow. Like I said, the acting is pretty solid. And it's, I think those interested in the time period will get a lot out of it, and it's worth seeing for them. Probably a rental. It's not really a must-see in the theaters. But, it's a decent movie that it kind of leaves itself open to interpretation. Because, really the only ones that knew what happened that night were Teddy Kennedy and the woman in his car. So, again, it's a rental, for me at best. The last movie I'm going to talk about today is one of the best movies of the year so far, by far. If this movie does not win my best horror thriller Opie this year, then whatever does win it will have had to step its freaking game up. Of course, I'm talking about A Quiet Place. This movie is about a family that's forced to live in silence while hiding from creatures that hunt by sound. First and foremost, this movie has a fantastic and extremely small cast. John Krasinski, who also co-wrote and directed this movie along with his real life wife, Emily Blunt. Millicent Simmons. I knew I was going to mispronounce that name. Millicent Simmons, who is actually really deaf, and it kind of plays into the movie. Also Noah Jupe and Cade Woodard. So the cast itself is a huge strong suit in this movie because these are the characters you're going to see the majority of the time. And I'm not saying there's not other people in the movie. Very few. But there's only a few other people in the movie. And so you spend a lot of time with these characters. And what they're able to do with barely saying a word. And don't get me wrong, the characters talk here and there. But, this movie is about being quiet. So they have to use sign language. And of course, with Millicent Simmons' character being deaf, the family knows sign language. So they're actually at an advantage when it comes to surviving this world because, they already know how to talk in silence, right? So, they have this advantage. What I love about this movie, other than the characters, is that it uses the lack of sound to stir fear. And man, it makes you fear the simplest of things. Footsteps, that nail sticking up on the staircase, which, man, that thing just builds up. It's like, oh, who's going to step on it and win, right? And how are they going to react? And even childbirth. You think about the world today and the sounds of the world. The littlest sounds that we make, that if you do it, you're going to get hurt. Even just bodily functions alone, right? If you make this loud sound, is this creature going to hear you and kill you? So yeah, the lack of sound, it just makes you... Okay, this movie does use a few jump scares, right? It does use some jump scares. But it's not one of those movies that's all it relies on. Because these jump scares lead to sound, lead to people needing to scream, lead to, anything that's sound in this movie is gonna bring the creatures. So, if, in the trailer you see the lantern fall over, well, that could mean death. You bumped a lantern and you could die, right? So there's just the lack of sound, and when sound is used, just really amps up the fear in this movie because, man, when those creatures come, they come and they're nasty. And we'll talk about them in a bit. So yeah, this movie is extremely smart because everything has to be quiet. And one of the examples is, okay, you think about a world like this that's in chaos. And of course you get to thinking, well, you gotta, forage for supplies or things like that, right? Well, the first scene in this movie is in a store. And up on the wall, for me, it was I thought it was hilarious because it's definitely product placement. But it's product placement that I actually liked because, you see, they're foraging for supplies in this store. And what they're looking for medicine because one of the sons is sick. And so while they're looking at bottles of pills, they're having to turn them real slowly because if those pills roll around in the pill bottle, it could draw the creatures in, right? At least, we don't know much at the beginning. I mean, if you know the trailer, you know why they're being quiet. But because throughout the movie, here and there, by seeing like newspaper clippings and things like that, you kind of learn what's happened in this world. But one of the funniest product placements was, and it took me 2 seconds to figure it out, going, oh yeah, there's a whole rack of Doritos chips, on those racks like in a convenience store, the little bags of chips, and you just pull them off the little hook. I'm like, man, why didn't anybody get the Doritos? Oh yeah, because they're loud and crunchy, So it's the movie really, plays into that even the food they consume has to be soft and not make a lot of noise. They eat a lot of fish and things like that isn't going to make a lot of sound when they eat it. They don't wear shoes, and they pour sand down on surfaces that would make a lot of noise. And even then, they're walking on a hardwood floor on sand, and you hear the tiniest of creak, and you're like, oh, the creature's coming, right? The movie is extremely smart when it comes to sound, because the things in the world have to be quiet, and things that make sound, like I said, whether it be Doritos chips or that toy with a battery in it that makes noises, everything has to be quiet, and the movie's very smart about that. I love that this movie doesn't waste a lot of time, especially with things like creature origins. The creatures are just there, and like I said, we learn a little bit about what they are, but we don't learn about where they came from or anything like that. And I do want to mention this. I read an article. Apparently, this movie was considered to be part of the Cloverfield group of movies. I'm so glad it's not. That being said, other than 10 Cloverfield Lane, this probably would have been the best Cloverfield movie if it was, because it was just as good, if not better. I'd say it probably was better than Cloverfield Lane, because it had more to do with the creatures and not just the living situation. But this movie could have been one of those movies, and I'm kind of glad it wasn't. I'm glad it's its own thing. But yeah, I remember reading that article thinking, man, what else are they going to turn into Cloverfield, right? They can almost turn anything into Cloverfield. Also, this movie doesn't start from the beginning. Like I said, you learn a lot about the world through news clippings and things like that, but the movie's like 83, 84 days in, from the first, and then it jumps to 400 and some, and then it jumps a little bit after that. So you're looking at basically 3 different time periods in this movie. And like I said, you kind of got to learn what's going on through, news clippings and things like that. John Krasinski's character has like a workshop, and it's got all sorts of things. He has things written down, looking for weaknesses in the creatures, learning what he can about them, what's their strengths, what's their weaknesses. So, you learn about the movie that way. This movie is more about the family itself and the things they're going through in this time period. But then again, they have to be quiet and survive creatures that are extremely brutal. So let's talk about the creatures. The creatures are creepy. They confirm in the movie there's like 3 or 4 in the area, according to Krasinski's character's notes. I think there's like 3 or 4 confirmed in the area. The creatures are CG, but the CG is really good because, first of all, it is mocap. I was reading up on it. They did do mocap for it, but other than a couple times, the way they use it, there was a couple times you could tell it was CG, but it wasn't terrible, because most of the time you see the creatures, you don't get a good look at them, and really only once or twice in the movie do you get a really good look at them. They show them up close a lot, where you can see, they kind of show you, how they're hearing, and things like that. And they do show them up close a couple times, but the effects are used really well. The monsters are just scary. They don't really explain what they are or anything. I like the mystery of that, but they do use them to great effect, because like I said, the fact that they're coming when something sound-wise happens, and just the fact that they're so effective makes those parts even creepier, because in a way, it kind of reminds me of a Predator, where if they find you, you're in trouble, right? So yeah, the creatures are really good in this movie. Some problems I have with the movie, and these are very minor, because don't get me wrong, I am going to recommend this movie. One of the problems I had, minor-wise, was I could have used a bit more info between the 80-some days and the 400-some days. I understand that they wanted you to kind of discover this stuff yourself, but you know, and you do discover enough that it really works because you will be invested in the family in the end. And heck, it didn't take me long to get invested in them. And I won't say why, but man, this movie gets your attention real quick. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, I could have used a bit more information. Am I mad that it wasn't there? No, because they had a story they wanted to set up. It just would have been kind of nice to see just a little bit more in between there. I mentioned the jump scares, but the jump scares they use, there's a couple that it's like, okay, did we really need that? But I'm not going to fault the movie because the jump scares that they did use had purpose and were done to good effect. So the jump scares didn't bother me too much. The plot does telegraph itself a bit too much, and the ending is kind of predictable. I didn't care though, because the story they were telling and the way they were setting things up, it worked for me. If this would have not been a well done movie, this would have bothered me. But the fact that I was invested in the family, I was scared of the creatures, I was finding myself holding my breath a lot because heaven forbid if I make a sound and a creature jumps me, that's the kind of effect this movie has. This movie is brilliant. So the fact that the plot is kind of predictable, I was okay with because I was enjoying the story as a whole. So again, is this the best horror movie of 2018? Well, by far right now it is. I can't think of anything that's coming out that can top this, so good luck to any studios that try to top this movie. It's just a fantastically written, acted, atmospheric, just horror movie. Just the creatures are scary, and I cannot recommend it enough. Go see this movie in theaters. Support it. They are talking about how they have stories about more. I kind of want them to just stop, but you never know what they're going to do. Because, who knows how these things are affecting the rest of the world. How far do they stretch? How many are there? We're only really focusing on one family, but there is a scene where John Krasinski's character lights a fire, and then you see other fires light up because there's more people out there. So who knows where they're going to go with it, if they are going to do anything with it at all. Whether or not they do anything more, go see this movie. Seriously, go see it. It's a must-see. Well, that's all I got for movies this time. Coming soon on the channel, I'm going to be taking a look at HBO's Andre the Giant documentary. Also, I'm going to be talking about John Hamm and Rosamund Pike's Beirut. The DC animated movie Suicide Squad Hell to Pay. The Rock's adaptation of the video game Rampage comes out this weekend. Also, there's a couple of dog movies. First one's based on a true story, Sergeant Stubby, an American Hero, but it's a cartoon that is based on a true story, so I'm kind of interested in that. And also, Isle of Dogs finally has come around here, so I'm going to be trying to take a look at it this weekend. So you can look forward to me looking at those either at the end of this week or early next week. Also, sooner or later, I'm going to get to Jessica Jones Season 2. I want to talk about it. I don't have a lot of time to watch a lot of TV shows, and, so I am going to cover that sometime in the near future. So that's going to be all for Talkin' Movies. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. For me, it was a lot of fun just to sit down with a few notes and talk about these movies. I really enjoy this format. Let me know what you guys think of this format, and you can leave that in the comment section below. If you like what you've heard here, please subscribe, share the channel, tell your friends about it, and help those numbers rise. Until next time, this is the real Geno Reynolds. See you later.